walked the journey of recovery together for over 30 years, and I cannot think of a better person to carry the message to us today than John Y. Brown III. Yeah.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you, Steve, so much. It's wow, a lot of people here. It's a great honor to see so many friends today, and people from my past. Andy Bleeden is also a board member and was one of my dearest friends in high school and ever since. I shared with Steve this story. I was busted central my junior and senior years, and I saw Andy on a holding court in the courtyard area, and everybody was laughing, and I was like, who is this guy? I want to get to know him. And we became friends, and ended up going on spring break together. And I drove, went to Fort Lauderdale, and one night we went to a bar on the Strip, Sunrise Strip, and Andy had Mark's, his older brother's ID, and got in, and I had a fake ID that they spotted and wouldn't let me in. So Andy said, just wait here for me, and I'll be out in a little bit. And so I stood off to the side and just peered in, and I could kind of see through the corner of this door. Andy was dancing and having fun and drinking and talking to the women. And he came out and he said, they're having a dance contest. Just give me a minute. It's like, you don't even dance. And I could see him dancing, and then he turned around and then did the splits and ripped his pants, and he won the dance contest. Yeah. And then I took him home afterwards, and it was either later that night or it may have been the next night, and we were having a heart-to-heart, and I was like, why can't I be more like you? You have such an ease with people and situations, and he said, well, you drink a lot and you get high a lot, and sometimes, you'll say something funny and it'll work, but sometimes if you're just kind of loaded, you'll say something like, I don't know, spaghetti and meatballs, and not literally meaning, but something that just doesn't make sense. And he said, and I remember that, but my takeaway wasn't that I should drink less, but avoid talking about pasta, I think. And so it was 5 years later before I made it to rehab. And Andy introduced me to my wife. I was a year and a half sober, and we had dinner, and he said, who you dating? I said, nobody. He said, when's the last time you had a date? And I said, well, let's see, it was a Thursday, Wednesday, about 9 months. And he said, well, I can help you fix that. And so we were at a party about a week later, and he goes up to my wife, Rebecca, and said, do you have a boyfriend? And she's like, no, not presently. And he said, do you want one? And she said, I don't know. He said, wait right here. And that was, what was it, 38 years ago or something. So thank you, Andy. Yes, thank you. Yeah. So, yeah. It's in. If you give enough money, I will. It's in it. It's in him still. So I did not go to the Morton Center, but I qualify, I suppose, because our family's been in therapy with John Walsh for about 15 years now, and John helped sort of found the Morton Center, and John has progressed very well during those 15 years, and I like to think our family has too, and we're grateful for you, John. You've been a godsend to us, and because of our relationship with you, we have such admiration for the Morton Center and all the great work that's done here. And so thank you very much. And I would like to get, so, you know, in AA, we, and by the way, I love that. I keep looking at this painting, and one of the best descriptions of recovery I've ever heard is one beggar telling another beggar where to find the bread. And I love those two chairs, one alcoholic talking to another, and the genius of that, and the magic of that. So we tell our stories, what happened, or you know, what it was like, what happened, what it's like now. So I guess we'll get to that. I was with my mom last night, and told her I was supposed to talk for 30 minutes, and showed her the list of the people attending, and she said, you know, you don't have to tell them everything. That's a very nice group of people. And, and in fact, you don't have to talk the whole 30 minutes. People like to get back to work after lunch. And I said, you're going to come out well, Mom. And I was born and raised here in Louisville, and I was, I think, a happy kid. I was anxious, you know. I used to chew on my shirt collar, and but I was, I think, a pretty happy kid. You know, as Steve mentioned, we kind of had a big life in some ways. My dad took over Kentucky Fried Chicken, and there was a lot of moving around, and you know, not much stability, continuity. It wasn't uncommon to go to 3 different schools in a year. You know, so I don't know that that was particularly healthy, but it was, but I love my family, and we had alcoholism on both sides. My grandfather on my mom's side, Muhlenberg County, and my grandmother on my dad's side. And I was aware of it, but I didn't think much of it as long as it didn't interfere too much. Because like most kids, you know, I didn't really take it to heart. And then my parents divorced when I was 13, and my father moved down to Fort Lauderdale and bought a place called Le Club International, which means the International Club, for those of you who don't speak French. I don't want anything particularly French about it. It was just sort of a swanky place for guys about his age who were divorced, and I would spend my summers there. And I looked it up online just as we were driving over, and they described it and said, and it sometimes can be a little naughty, which. But it was, and it attracted some, I guess you might call them seedy people, and I've always had an affinity for seedy people. I just get them, I like them. There's not much pressure around them. They usually think they're gifted in multiple areas and interesting, and I don't know. They're endearing, I guess. And there was a lot of folks like that there. There was a lot of gambling, young women. I mean, it's a 13-year-old's fantasy, basically, you know, being there. And so I saw a lot of things, did a lot of things that probably was too young to have seen and done. But I think in looking back, I was scared. I was scared of trying things and of just being average or maybe even just above average. And so I wouldn't do it. And I would tell myself, this just isn't worthy of my. If I wanted to, I could do it, but I choose not to. I've got better things to do, and that's a tough way to go through life. And I tell my kids, get on the field, go out, and if you're not failing in life, you're not trying hard enough. You know, get scuffed up, and they have, and I love that about them. When I finished high school, my father sat me down. I was graduating the bottom half of my class. He knew about my drinking. He'd had a friend try to 12-step me. And I remember him saying at one point, if we got out had a blackboard and wrote down the ways you could screw up your life, I don't think you're leaving anything out, you know? And so he had sold Encyclopedia Britannica door to door as a young man and had been a top salesman regionally and got a lot of acclaim for it. And he said, why don't you do this? Why don't you get a door-to-door sales job? And there's this company in Tennessee. They hire college students, and this will be good for you. It's going to build character. It's going to teach you how to sell yourself and your ideas. And I said, okay, we'll try this. And they sent me to Pikeville, Kentucky. And I really didn't care for the job. It was 75 hours a week and I have sold Bibles and medical books, children's books, and a family Bible door to door up in the hollers of Pikeville. And my first customer, by the way, was Judy Patton, who was Paul Patton's wife. And it was my third day. And then every week we would have our sales meetings, and they would publish how everyone did. And there was, several thousand salespeople nationwide. And those sales reports would come out, and I would be in the middle, and I just couldn't take that. So about the third week, I came up with this idea that, what if I got a loan and bought a lot of the books, put them down as sales, and in the fall, after the summer ends, I could sell them on my own back home. Nobody'd be the wiser, and let's give this a try. So I went to Pikeville National Bank. I got a loan for $2,800, and the next week I was the #1 first-year salesperson in the nation. And it was great. We had our Sunday sales meeting in Blackberry, Virginia. The other salespeople hoisted me on their shoulders and carried me around the room and asked me to give a talk on my sales technique. And I was happy to do it, which is weird, but there was something in me that said, I could do this if I wanted to. I just have found an angle, an easier, softer way, as we say in the program. So I gave a pretty good talk, actually. I took questions, and I was loving it. And my dad would call every night and tell me how proud he was of me and give me sales tips. And I felt like we're finally getting close, and this is wonderful. And my sales manager was at a meeting in Texas and said he had this gem of a guy in Kentucky. And he was not only #1 this week, but he was going to be #1 next week, too. So Pikeville wouldn't loan me any more money for that next week. But I drove into Liberty National, where my mom did her bit, and they somehow gave me $1,800, which was just enough for me to be first in the nation again that next week. And I carried on with my plan. It got harder and harder to loan money, to get but by the end of the summer, I had the highest per week sales average of any first-year salesperson, and I had bought a little over $10,000 worth of Bibles and medical books, and I was storing them at a friend's house in Lexington, and I remember him saying, if you don't mind, would you pretend that you're buying the medical books instead of the Bibles, because they're lighter and easier to store up here. And that's about $35,000 in today's money, so it was a lot. And the company started calling me. They had figured it out, and I went down to the club and went on a big binge and wouldn't answer the phone, and I didn't know what to do. I came home and I fessed up, and fortunately they took back all of the books that I had bought. And the sad part is, when the actual numbers came out, I finished in the top 10% for real sales. But I didn't feel like that was, good enough. I had to be the best.